Good evening, and welcome to Redbrick's first analysis of Prime Minister's questions, with me, Freddie Herzog, online news editor,
and me, Owen Earwicker, online content and features editor.
We're going to start straight off with the debate tonight between David Cameron and Ed Miliband. It kicked off when Ed Miliband stood up to ask David Cameron questions. So massive boos from the Conservatives. It really wasn't received very well.
It was interesting the amount of jeers he got, and in response to that, how tired and withdrawn he looked. Perhaps signs recent.
You can see it's not just a sign on Miliband's face, but across his whole shadow cabinet that they're just exhausted.
Yes, we could definitely see that.
Anyway, the debate between them focused on unemployment figures rising for the sixth month in a row. So unemployment is now 8.5%, up from 8.4%. And Miliband started off by asking, does the government kind of care about this? And then Cameron sort of said, of course, government is committed to sorting out the unemployment crisis, and emphasised that we need more public sector employment. And then kind of got into the whole kind of the sort of typical PMQs thing where Ed Miliband said, this Prime Minister is out of touch, it's harking back to a Tory government of the 1980s, and then a debate about kind of the analysis of figures came out, and sort of how facts and figures are used in government.
Cameron was very keen to point out something that he points out quite often in Prime Minister's questions of the Office of Budget Responsibility being independent of government, and he was keen to get in the comment about how Labour never introduced that, and that Labour had the power to fiddle figures, and that he said, to direct quote, he said, the figures provided by the government and the Office of Budget Responsibility are not fixed and fiddled by ministers, sort of harking back to the scandal over figure fixing during Tony Blair's reign. I think an interesting point that came up as the debate went on and inevitably went into spending cuts, an interesting point by Cameron was that Miliband marched against the cuts last year, and yet this year it emerged this week that he's supporting some cuts. We really get the sense that continuing now, these are the wilderness years of Labour. They really need to have another leadership election really to get out of this. It's exactly like the Conservatives were after Tony Blair took power, and they just need to sort of find some grounding because they're really not doing well at the moment.
David Cameron did say about Ed Miliband, he's so incompetent he can't even do a U-turn properly, which I think probably sums up the opinion of most of his party and most of the Labour Party actually as well. This caused kind of great raucous in PMQs to the extent that the Speaker, John Bercow, had to stand up and said, the class must try to calm itself down and contain itself. A sort of great laughter and stuff. But John Bercow does, after being kind of joked around a bit in the first sort of year of his tenure, he does now seem to be able to have a sort of quite a commanding presence in PMQs, and people do actually seem to be able to listen to him and respect him, I think, which is quite good.
One point in defence of Miliband, though, Cameron was talking a lot about, with regards to the figures that were used, about the longer term impacts of the solutions that they put in place, and that results won't be instantaneous with this. Miliband obviously calls for something quicker, something faster to be implemented. I think there's some grounding in that. The UK is not pulling out of its recovery as quickly as other countries are, and there is certainly something to be said for working harder to get the solutions in place now rather than waiting for longer term effects.
That kind of was the main focus of the debate between Miliband and Cameron. It then moved on to questions from other MPs from across the House, and this included issues on water charges, beaches in the southwest, betting shops, the powers of the regulator Ofcom, the European Court of Human Rights and the National Crime Agency. There were some specific points that we want to raise, though. The first was from the Conservative MP Andrew Brusindell, who said that was kind of asking about the actions of the 30th anniversary of the Falklands War, and the recent actions by Argentina, the actions by putting a warship in the Falklands waters. David Cameron answered this by kind of saying the Falklands War should be commemorated, and the people who served there should be honoured, and that the future of the Falklands Islands is down to the people on those islands, not down to the British people, and definitely not down to the Argentinians.
Yeah, I think that's a key point that most people can be agreed on. Sovereignty is decided by the people, not by foreigners wanting to take over. Interesting point, I think, that the Camerons accused the Argentines of colonialism, which is what the Argentines have been accusing the British for a long time. But it's not colonialism if the citizens of the Falkland Islands want to be British.
The final point that was raised was by kind of one of the sort of characters of PMQs, who we'll probably see a lot throughout our analysis of the questions. Dennis Skinner, who's a kind of very sort of stalwart old Labour character, who was asking, when does the Prime Minister expect to be cross-examined by the Leveson Inquiry? The British people deserve an answer as to why he appointed Andy Coulson. This was answered by saying, David Cameron said, I'd be delighted to appear in front of the inquiry when I'm asked to be, and then said, this is a direct quote from him, he said, I often say to my children, no need to go to the Natural History Museum to see a dinosaur, come to the House of Commons at about 12:30, come to see Dennis Skinner.
Yeah, I think Cameron saying he's delighted to appear in front of the inquiry was just a flat-out lie. I think he's dreading it. The fact that he appointed Andy Coulson is serious misjudgment.
You could say that.
But I think the fact that he was very dismissive of the question and then very insulting shows how worried he is about this issue, and that will be an interesting one to follow up in later weeks.
Next few weeks. That's it for our first analysis of Prime Minister's questions. Come back next week when we'll be analysing next week's questions. I've been Freddie Herzog.
And I've been Owen Earwicker.
Thank you very much for watching.